On this episode of Leaving a Rich Legacy, I had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with some of my girlfriends about what it was like being raised in a single mother household, but then also really tackle some of the conversations we wish we would have had in middle school, high school, while in college, our 20s, and even just a few years ago in our 30s. This episode is really important to me because it falls right in line with the purpose of this podcast, which is basically a love letter to myself, the younger Jessica, and really having conversations that I wish I would have had growing up. And in this episode, you'll see we tackle a few different topics that are along the same lines as far as, what we wish we would have known earlier, some of the mistakes that we made, really understanding that our mother is human and is more than just our mother, and giving grace and becoming an adult, understanding better capacity, and our parents doing the best that they could have. But this is only one of many conversations, because this is something that I want to be ongoing, because it's really the premises of this podcast, talking about the conversations that I just wish I would have had sooner, and no one's really thinking about talking about it. And you'll see in this episode that some of the women had not discussed any of this yet, so it was a first opportunity for them as well. Now, we had a great time, and we got a little chatty Cathy. So this is going to be part one of two, so that it will allow you to hear the initial first part of the conversation, and then the second part will be uploaded on Thursday. So I hope you enjoy this episode. If you have any recommendations, I would love to hear from you as well, because it is so important that we have these conversations and we don't wait, because although I'm 36, this conversation could really impact someone else, a young woman graduating from college, from high school, going into high school, entering to the workforce, whatever it may be. But my goal is to make an impact with these conversations. So I hope you enjoy.
All right, ladies. So I'm so excited to have y'all on the podcast. I'm sure you've watched episodes and we've had conversations, but this podcast is like a love letter to myself. And what we're going to talk about tonight is like right there in line with what I think about when I think about conversations I wish I would have had with friends, associates, family, my siblings, my mom growing up, and I just never had them. And I know in our relationships, we've all talked about different things when it comes to, how we were raised, romantic partners, friendships, careers. And there's so many things that I feel like in the Black community, like we just don't talk about at a higher level. And I wanted to get all you all today just so we could talk about some things that we just did not talk about growing up, even at age 36, the stuff we still don't talk about. So I'm super excited for us to have this conversation and that y'all agree to be here, because everybody's not comfortable with having these type of conversations. So first, thank you for that. So go ahead and just share a little bit about yourself, age and name, so everybody knows that information when we kind of go through some of the conversations.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Wilson, and I'm 37 years old. Thank you for inviting me.
Yay, happy to have you.
Hi, I'm Ryan, and I'm 32 years old. I always have to think of.
Hi, I'm Monica, and I'm 36 years old.
Awesome. And it's a combination of marital status. So Ashley and Monica are married. Ryan is in a relationship, and I'm single. So it's definitely going to give different perspectives, and there's a different age range, which I think is great. All right. So y'all are my friends, and by y'all being my friends, I just kind of bring y'all together, which I do a good job with doing that with different friend groups. But we've all been through therapy and are on journeys to become a better version of ourselves. So I'm always looking for opportunities to reflect, and I know you all do the same. So if I'm correct, all of us, were raised in single mother households, different, right? Different results. My parents were married and divorced. So, but all of us were raised by single mothers who really, really instill some things into us. And I want to like first start off just thinking about that and how that made you the woman that you are today. My parents divorced. My sister and I and my mom moved in with my aunt and my cousin. So that was 5 women in the house. And we went from all these kids at my dad's house, and then we went to living with just women. And it was a complete shift because one, you don't have that relationship with your father in the house. I didn't have the relationship with my siblings. I got 7 siblings. And 7 of us grew up in the house together. So I didn't have that interaction on a daily basis. And being raised by a single mother really, really like pushed me to, I felt like always shoot for beyond the stars. Like the sky wasn't the limit. Like I had to go beyond the sky because it was like success was, there was no other conversation than success. Like that's what I had to achieve. And it's not that my mom was so hard on me, but I feel like because of how I was raised and we didn't have a father in the home, even though on a biweekly basis I spent time with my dad, it just made me feel like I had to be strong. And that's something over the last couple of years I really, really have thought about. Like, I don't have to be strong. I can be soft. I can cry. I can be with myself. I don't have to carry the weight of everyone. But I think being raised by a woman in a household full of women, we were doing things by ourselves. Oh my gosh, I hate lizards. Ooh, I hate lizards. But we had to get the lizards, right? Those are things that we had to do, or my mom, my aunt did, because there wasn't a male in the household. So it just conditioned me to have that mentality, like I got to make things happen. And I wish I would have had a better balance growing up, that even though that's the way I was raised, like when it comes to relationship with others, like I could tone that down. But I like what it did do is help me be who I am and be successful and build relationships with you all and others. So I don't regret it, but I do wish that I would have had more of a balance to see what it's like on the other side, getting a little bit older, living with my dad, because I was just so disconnected by the time they divorced. I was in middle school and high school and I was hanging with my friends. But it definitely set the foundation for who I am and my faith and being a good friend and a sister and a daughter. And I appreciate that. But I do know being in a house with just women, there's a lot of things we just didn't talk about. So, just thinking about your upbringing and, being in a single parent household, like how did that kind of help you become the woman you are today?
Yeah, I guess for me, my dynamic was a little bit different. So my mom and dad divorced when I was 5 months old. So growing up, I'd never lived in the house with a male. So relationship wise, it definitely affected my relationship with the opposite sex. For one, because my mom, I always saw her being so independent doing things. She worked really hard. She was a school teacher, but she worked year round. There was not a workshop or summer school that she wasn't at. So that's what I saw. So for me, it's like I have to get it no matter what. So like you mentioned that success wasn't shooting for the stars, it was shooting past it. It was like I had to have the best grades. I had to get into school, free ride. So I didn't put that additional pressure, because that was the other thing. I didn't want to put pressure or stress on my mom because she had already sacrificed and had done so much. So I found myself overcompensating a lot. I feel like as a teen, going into a young adulthood, that I really didn't, in a sense, have a childhood. In a sense, I put additional pressures on myself because of that. But that's something that I didn't realize until I was starting reflecting with my therapist and having that conversation, because I'm thinking, oh, I have, this awesome mom and this, and this. And don't get me wrong, she was great. But these were like unspoken pressures, because you saw the struggles, you saw her, itemizing bills to make sure everything got taken care of. So that was another thing. I did that starting out as a young adult, trying to make sure finances were correct. That if I went up for a promotion, that I got that promotion no matter what. Like I did it. So for me, she made me a strong, independent woman. But at the same time, it was kind of like a blessing and a curse at the same time, because when it comes down to relationships, like with my dad. My dad was around, but it wasn't the same. I didn't even have the same respect, I would say, in a sense, for my dad as I did my mom, because she was my primary parent. Like, if whatever she said, it went. I don't care what anybody else was talking about. Like, she was the head of the household and the head of everything in my life. And I've really recently just started to disconnect from realizing, like, you're married. You've been married now for almost 9 years at the end of this month, and you still sometimes look for that acceptance and security from your mom, and you have to break away from that. But it took me a long time to really realize what was going on. But it made me work hard. I am successful, thankfully for that. Educated, I have great kids, and I have a great life overall. But there were some flaws by having just that female experience in life.
Yeah, you brought a good point, Monica, about like the work ethic. And did you grow up too quickly? My brother would joke and say, like, you were never a kid. And even one of my college roommates would say the same. But I did start working at 15, and it's because I wanted to. Like, I wanted to buy things, but it did kind of make me grow up a little bit more quicker, because I became independent, because that's what I saw was independent, strong women working to make it happen. And to your point, making sacrifices. So I definitely can relate to that.
I've been kind of thinking as you ladies have been talking, and like when I was growing up, like my dad was really involved. And so like, I guess like I used to always think that like I didn't grow up in a single parent household, but like the older I've gotten, the more I realized like my mama had us like legitimately the majority of the time. And I understand that it had to be like overwhelming at times for her and kind of frustrating. And I can definitely say that like I just probably did not give her enough credit like growing up as I should have, because I had such a close relationship with my dad. My mom, very laid back person. She will definitely blow up every now and then, and it's like, oh, where'd that come from? But she's definitely like a more like reserved person when it comes to like dealing with situations. And when I was growing up, I think that I was like much easier to react and like kind of not necessarily like I had definitely a smart mouth and like I would say a hothead. But like I would see her react to certain things, and she would be like, I'm not letting that worry me. I'm not being bothered by it. And I used to be like, I used to like look at that as like a trait of weakness. And like the older I've gotten, like the more I'm so impressed with her, because like she rarely lets things bother her, right? She's like, that's not my worry. And like, one of the other things that I had to understand as my mom was growing up is like, even though I had two older sisters, my older sisters kind of left our house fairly early. So like my sisters weren't in the house beyond like 15 and 16. And so like as I in some of those ages in my life, I was realizing like my mom left her house when she was about that age as well. So I was realizing like my mom didn't have her mom to mother her at that stage of her life. And she hadn't mothered other girls, right, at that stage in their lives either. And so I struggled with that relationship at the time. It made it really difficult for me to have, like relationships with women. And it wasn't, it was like, women were catty or against me. It was more so like, if we have one disagreement, like I don't mind not like talking to you again, because I feel like, well, I don't.
Hey, Ryan, you were kind of going, you were going completely out now. You were kind of going in and out. We can make it out, but can y'all hear Ryan?
No, I can't.
Okay.
I cannot either.
Okay. So she may have some connectivity issues. It looks like she's joining on a different line.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, we can hear you perfectly now.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Apologies. But what I was saying is like, I realized like came to relationships with women, I was like, I don't talk to mom all the time. I don't talk to my sisters all the time. So like, I don't care if you're not in my life. Like these women aren't in my life, you know? And eventually I have definitely, we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, but I've grown out of it. And like I have grown to a place where I've started to respect and appreciate what she did so much for me when I was younger, because she really let like a lot of the crazy stuff I did just like kind of slide off her back, you know. But one thing I can say that my mom definitely had in common with your mom's is always worked. She literally got up every single day. I cannot remember a day that my mom did not go to work. She instilled in me definitely a solid work ethic, and she showed me that work. Like it wasn't just about her saying it, she did it. She worked multiple jobs when she needed to, if it meant like, you know, if Christmas up or she had something she had to pay for us, she made sure that she showed that, you know, she would earn what she needed and that we could be provided for. And she was at everything. She was at every like volleyball games, softball games. She was a part of the PTA. She was a part of the booster club. She was the president of the booster club at one time. So like I just always felt supported by her, even though I did not like always appreciate that presence in my life. And like now I don't know, now it's kind of all like come into a place where I'm like, wow, I do have that support, even though at some point I felt like
Yeah, you know, I think sometimes we forget like and I know Revlon said this on, I think that was episode 3 or 4, but we forget that our parents are human. And she was a woman before she was your mama, and she is a woman outside of being your mama, and she's somebody's sister, somebody's daughter. But we do forget that, and I am definitely guilty of that. And I've had to work through like the expectations I had. I need to also give grace and recognize the things that were done. So that's a true story that a lot of people need to face the reality when you think about what they did do. And then, you know, kind of like it was a lot that we don't really consider.
Well,
yeah.
as I reflect on what you ladies were saying, I was thinking about my childhood and just with my mom. Not only did I grow up in a single household, but a Caribbean household at that. Jessica, I don't know if you know this, but my mom was married 3 times. Probably until like I was like 10 years old. And I don't remember a man being in the house very long. And for me saying that and sharing that is because my mom had a zero tolerance for men and anything that she didn't deem that was worthy of her. My mom always like kind of embedded in us, you're a prize. You do not take anything from a man or anything from anyone. And with my mom coming over here to the States without an education, she was really big on her children making it and just getting an education. That's all she wanted. And even though thinking about my siblings, our success looked differently, and I was the first to go to college, I knew what my mom wanted. But thinking back, you know, it did affect me a lot more than I realized, because I have grown up guarded, not really trusting men. Kind of, and when I say guarded, I know we're going to go into relationships probably later, but keeping things from my husband, like, you know, financing, you know, we grew up poor. So my thing was, I will never be poor again. And so, you know, I know that wasn't my mom's goal, but that was the effect. And especially, you know, and I have some pretty, you know, thinking about the men that my mom married, there wasn't bad men, but my mom had a zero tolerance, zero. And I don't think she realized the effects it had on her kids. So in saying that, as an adult, I definitely became very guarded and very tight with money. With being in a single household that was low income. So and I don't want to get into relationships because I know we're going in that later, but it definitely affected me more in my relationship with men than anything.
So we
Seeing my,
can go ahead.
oh, go, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought because this is definitely, I want you to finish your thought.
It definitely affected me more with men. So, and I just grew up thinking like I never had to get married. I didn't need to. I can do it by myself because that what was embedded in my mom is still you're independent. Um, I learned how to save very, very early. My mom was really good with money being poor. And so I learned, hey, if you have 100, you save 75 and make that 25 work. And so, but I think more being married now, the effects were, I mean, I've learned a lot in these last 2 years.
And she is tight with money. She might need to be my accountant. But to your point, like even the relationship with money growing up in a single parent household, for me, it's like financial stability is a non-negotiable. And that's the one thing my therapist, she was like, that is a non-negotiable for you and you need to accept it and we got to move on because we're not getting progress based on how you were raised, your childhood experiences, and that's a non-negotiable for you in a relationship. And to your point, Ashley, you're on the tighter end of it, you are good with money, but then you're working through that when you with your husband. No, I did not know your mom was married 3 times, but you know what? Like, I'm not even surprised. Just based on the advice that was given, because I know I definitely feel like with relationships, I wish more would have been said, but you have to think about the generations before where those conversations had too, for expectations. So actually,
Your phone, I mean, you're breaking up really bad.
okay, how did that affect your relationships? I did just see it said my connection was unstable. So can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay. How did that affect your relationships?
For one, going like in my 20s, I said to myself, I would never get married. It was no point of getting married. And then when I met, I dated. And when I met my husband was ready to get married a few years ago, but I was pushing him away. And when I finally said yes to the engagement, I read triggers when we went to counseling was me being independent, not letting go, not letting him know my finance. I still believe in having separate accounts. However, especially with me currently being a stay-at-home mom, we had to have a joint account so I can have access to money that's coming in the household. But it was embedded. You keep your account separate. You always have something for a rainy day. You don't know when a man's gonna walk out. You don't know this. You don't know that. So I went into in every relationship I had with doubts and not trusting. I don't give you the benefit of the doubt. You have to prove you worthy of me. And so, and my husband was very, very patient. And when we went to counseling, that was the red triggers. The lady said, she was just like, she's independent. You grew up in this too, because he grew up with both his parents. But it was very, very hard. And even now, depending on him through the death of my mom, depending on him through the process of being a new mom, I have to lean on him a lot. And I didn't know how to do that because I was taught you do it on your own. You cannot depend on anyone. They can walk out any day. And I do believe my mom left all 3 of her ex-husbands. Just know she left them before they can walk out on her. And so I kind of had that, kind of ingrained. They're not gonna play me. They're not going to disrespect me. I will leave before they leave me. And so before they left me, excuse me. So this is, I'm still working through that, through counseling and being able to completely and fully trust my husband. Because again, you know, it's in my mind, he can leave, and he can leave, but he's such a God knew who the God definitely made him for me because of his patience. But my mom, it's a lot of trauma. I mean, it's just because I'm traumatized, and I didn't realize I was so traumatized until this last 2 years, where, well, the last year and a half, I had to lean on him, and it was so hard. Because I'm so used to making it happen on my own and doing it for everyone else as well. So, yes, my being raised in a single mother household definitely have its effects 37 years after. So, I'm working through that now.
That's I love that you talked about the trauma, because I think you all are realizing through therapy that trauma isn't always physical. But when I talk to other people, they're like, no, I didn't experience no trauma. Well, when we think of trauma, we only think of some type of physical abuse. And that's not always the case. And it's not intentional trauma, right? But it's just based on the experiences that we had. So that is real. And even at age 37, 36, you 37, not me. But no, I'm joking. I'm joking with her. But, at 36, I am still working through triggers. And now that I know what they are, I have a better understanding and I can communicate better. But I haven't been in a relationship since I really started going through therapy, but I know that I'm more aware of my triggers so that I won't be responding based on how I was raised and things that did happen and did not happen. And I can be a better communicator through those. That's what I say now. I'm believing that because I hadn't had experience yet. But so yes, but the single parent household, me not seeing my mom really dating anybody like that. And even when she married her husband, I was in college. So my sister got to experience that. I did not. So I can't even I can't even speak from that experience, but I do feel like it it did play a huge part in some of the relationships I've had and even some of the mistakes I had. I'll be honest with that. What about you, Ryan and Monica?
I think that like in my earlier relationships, like I feel like I grew up in a fairly conservative household. And like the funny thing about Black people in general is like we don't realize that the majority of us do, but like my family's from Southeast Texas, Southern Louisiana. So like my mom is like, she has 6 brothers, and she was like, when they would come over and visit, really all of like my girl cousins, my sisters, we were kind of like, I don't know, somewhat servants to like my uncles or like the men in our like relationships, and so, or excuse me, like in our family. And like, even though my mom like could take care of herself, like most of the interactions I've seen her have with men, even my dad, like she was very like kind of in a servant position. And so like in my earlier relationships, I will say that like I definitely focused on like being that to the people that I dated, like to my detriment, because like I lost myself a lot of times. And it was definitely based on like what I observed from my mom. Like, and not to say she was a pushover or anything. That's just like the nature of how she grew up in, like our culture and like, how we're kind of raised. And so that was something that I really struggled with, because like I had to realize like, a really good relationship is definitely a partnership. It shouldn't be me like having to be completely submissive all the time to someone. And so, that was hard for me to get over and like start to understand like I'm going to struggle with this until I realize like I have to put my foot down and say like I can't always like give to you if I don't have like it within me, to give. And to Ashley's point as well, completely agree from the financial perspective. Like definitely will always. I say I probably will, but I will probably always have some money to the side because that's just how I am, and I think a lot of women are, and I can't blame anybody for feeling that way. And honestly, I'm not working through it because like you said, Jessica, that's one of my non-negotiables, and I'm not working through it. No, thank you. But because I have been like, so, I will say I have been dependent upon myself. Like, one of the relationships that I did have, like right out of school, we were living together, and then like at some point he was kind of like, you need to find somewhere else to stay. And at that time he was taking care of like, everything. I was fresh out of school, barely had a job. It scared the shit out of me, excuse my language. But then like right after that, I figured out like I could do everything on my own. And so since then, that's kind of a piece of my trauma. Like I used to be like, I don't need a man to do this for me, or I don't need a man to do that for me. And now like I have gotten to a point in my life where I'm like, I might not need you to do it for me, but you're going to, because I deserve it. So I would definitely say that like, it's a weird like kind of position because for me to be in that I was in, because like I was given of myself like in like like in the house and stuff like that, but I wasn't like being receptive to like any support, and it was like a really draining place for me to be. But I have like I can definitely say that I have like intentionally worked on being more open to like having my partner handle like all the bills and stuff like that. Actually, I kind of like swung to the other side where I'm like, I don't want to pay no bills. Like, like I don't want to do that. But that's something I have worked through. And then also being able to say like, I can't, I love you. I enjoy being in this relationship with you, but like right now I need my own time. I can't pour into you. I'm sorry. Like once I like regroup and I get back to a place where I can do more, I will. But like I need you to figure it out on your own for a little bit, because I just can't help you right now.
I don't know. Ryan, I like the last part you said about figuring it out on your own, because I do, and I know I'm not a man, but I do feel like that also allows a man to learn how to lead and work through things. Like it's okay to bounce things off of you and ask questions and things like that, but sometimes you just don't have it in you. So like I would want to see you be able to work through some things too when I'm not
Mhm.
available, because I may not be mentally or emotionally in a place to be that person. To your point, and like, can you still lead the way through that? Like, do you
Yeah,
do you know how to do that? So I do think that's important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
For me, relationship wise, it definitely affected my relationship with my spouse. Um, like Ashley, I am the one that has the secret bank accounts, and I've never been one to commingle money together. I'm like, here are the bills, just make sure they're paid. And I'm going to keep my check over here in my account where I know it's safe. So, and I'll tell you, it's been so severe that only within the last year and a half that did my husband actually know how much money I make. He still does not know like our annual bonus. He still does not know what that range really is. I say one number, I look at him and he's like, okay, I know you're lying to me, but, and it's just something that I cannot not do. I have tried, so I've been doing baby steps when it comes down to sharing that piece, because my mom, she too was, you need to have something for a rainy day. You never know what he's going to do. Those types of things. So for the longest, and I'll tell you, Ashley, you're not alone in this. For the longest, it took me a long time to trust my husband completely with certain information. Like I wouldn't tell him, I would call my mom and I would talk about it with her versus talking about it with my mate, my partner. And again, another segue or commercial for therapy. Therapy kind of helped break that cycle a little bit when we started to have couple and individual therapy, so that we could try to work on some of these communication gaps, because it did cause a lot of issues with communication. And I would be frustrated and he really wouldn't understand why. And I knew that I needed to let him in. So relationship wise, it like on the opposite sex, it definitely made me more reserved. I would tell people I did not date a lot because I didn't really see my mom dating. My mom, I'm 36. My mom has never remarried in all these years that she's been divorced from my dad. And when she did date, it was outside of the house. Like she really was not bringing people into the home because she was very, very protective in that sense. And I had to kind of relinquish some of that protection, even with my own kids, that I would be very concerned and I wouldn't really trust a lot of people with my kids. Not because anything happened, especially nothing that I could recall at this particular point in my life, but that's just something I always saw her doing as well. But I would say the good thing about growing up in a single parent home with primary females, I think I definitely got some really good traits in order to build relationships with women. I don't build a lot of relationships with women because I am still very selective, but I think I've done a pretty good job of finding long-term friends that I can trust, we can build, we can uplift each other together because of what my mom instilled in me during that particular time. I just wish it would have been just a little bit different. When it comes down to, like I said, the financial piece, dealing with the opposite sex, because like I said, like I told people, I even had to tell my husband, like, you're the first person I've ever lived in the house with, so I needed you to do some things differently. And I probably was a lot more judgmental of him because of that.
Ooh, I can relate to the judgmental piece. Monica, we're gonna talk about therapy, and this could be, we might can segue into it now, but so you and your husband went to therapy separately and together, correct?
Sure. Yes.
You know, one thing that I've heard, you know, people talk about is, you know, I don't need a therapist. And if there's something going on, then I'll go with that individual. How has it helped you all? Because you've experienced couples therapy and then doing it separately and coming together. How has it helped you to, as far as your relationship and communication, actually going to therapy separately and then coming back together?
I think separately, it gave you an opportunity for someone to really point out or help you self-discover some of those individual items that you need to work on more so than anything. Because a lot of times, you know, in your mind, you're blaming the other person. And a lot of times you don't realize that the issue is really you. And I'm like, no, not me. Because, you know, in your mind, you think you're doing everything perfect. You're this perfect wife, you're this perfect mom, and not realize what you're doing to the other person. So, you know, having an opportunity to talk about it as a couple, you know, it gave you topics that you can go to your individual therapist with, especially if you were really into it to better the communication, the relationship as a whole, the love and the commitment that you have. It made you realize that, you know, there are some things that you can work on. And I think the couples therapy, it really just helped us to really enhance our communication. Remember that we have to put each other first, even though we do have kids, and don't let everything revolve around our kids, because at some points it will get that way in a marriage. So even remembering to date again are things that we learned through that couples therapy process. But at the same time, individually, we learned that, okay, we need time with our friends, we need time with ourselves, we need time with our spiritual leaders, like we need time with different groups of people so that we can continue to grow, develop, and to be the best spouse that we can be to one another.
Okay, good. Thank you. Because that's something that I always have conversations with, specifically like singles, especially single men, or sometimes the men in the Black community where they don't want to go. And I'm like, there's so many benefits if you go separately versus together, because as a partner, you know, a man or a woman, I'm not responsible to be a therapist to you, and it's good to go on your own. So I want to know about, like, thinking about your early 20s. Is there something that you wish you would have known or done differently to kind of help set you up in life? And one of the things that I know, like when I think back, and Monica, you were talking about you didn't date much. Like I dated my high school sweetheart in college.
and Ashley knows this person. Everybody loved him. But like, I should not have been dating him. There was just so much that happened. You know, I definitely didn't know my worth, obviously, because like he would cheat it multiple times, and he wasn't even cute. When I think back, I'm like, he wasn't even cute, but he
He
had a
really
good personality. He was what?
He really wasn't.
He was not. Like, he like,
Oh my gosh, y'all need to stop.
He wasn't attractive. You know, I dated him for 4 years. I started dating him in high school. When I did start dating him, it was a little bit before my grandmother passed away. So that was just a traumatic experience for me. And like, we dated the entire 4 years. I did experience kind of what Ryan talked about. Like, my freshman year, he would do certain things for me because I wasn't really working. And it was like he was keeping track of things he did, but the cheating. And then my senior year in college, we ended up like just, you know, cheating again, but we're living together, both our names on the lease. I actually got an eviction on my record because the apartment complex, you know, I had requested to be removed. They didn't process it, and because it had been filed already, the eviction, and I was still listed, even though it was an error, I had to pay. So my mom paid the money for the eviction. And I remember, like, even after that, when I moved to Oklahoma City, that came up. That came up in Oklahoma City. It came up when I went to Richardson, and I always kept the records to show, like, you know, it was paid off, it was an error, but that still followed me on my record, and I just had no business being with him. And I think one thing I wish that I would have known is just like, date more in college, have fun. I was in a full-blown committed relationship living with somebody in college who he just didn't have a lot of things going on. I think that really played a huge part in some of the mistakes I made in relationships. So like, when I think about other girls and what I wish I would have known, and I don't even think me and my mom have ever talked about this. I wish she would have told me to cut him loose. When I think back, like, you know, I think if she would have actually said it, I would have done it, but it was never said. So I dealt with it. And I definitely think that played a part on the relationships and some of the mistakes that I made after. So I wish I would have known then to enjoy life and date and have fun, you know, be careful, but like, just experience those things and not be in a committed relationship. So is there anything else? Is there anything y'all think about when, like, your early 20s or after college, high school or college, that you wish you would have known, or conversations that you would have had that would have helped you be more focused or do things differently?
I definitely wish in my early 20s, learning how to say no and creating boundaries, not only with friends, but with family. I did a lot of things for other people when the focus in my early 20s should have been me. And even with the dating, I dated a lot. We were, a little bit different, but also letting go of relationships. The red flags were there. And so just letting go and letting God. Honest. And because I was always spiritual in my 20s and definitely in my 30s, but I didn't let go when God revealed. And he always, like, just looking back, it was always moments where that was the time I should have just let go. And so if for a young girl or a young woman really entering into womanhood, it's okay to say no and mean it. It's okay to date, but let go when you have exhausted all possibilities. Live life. And that's one of the things, probably one of my biggest regrets is just not saying no and not letting go when God had revealed. On numerous occasions, I should have let go.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. Like, I can definitely say that one of the things that I think it's so weird because I feel like when we're younger, like, we feel like we're in a relationship is like the only man in the world. You feel like, oh, I'm never gonna find anybody else. ever again, right? And then the older you get, you're like, it's men out here, it's like, it's men out here that's like willing to do like right by you and like take care of you, like be that partner that you want and like encourage you, like help with like financial concerns, things like that. When I was younger, like I wish someone would have told me. I see stuff people talking about, oh, the dating pool is like terrible now and all this other stuff. Um, Not true. Like people, like I really genuinely believe that there are people out there that want to have relationships and they want someone to build with, they want companionship. And so I think like anybody, like when I was younger in relationships, I would be scared to leave because I'm like, well, what if I don't find anybody else? But piece of me getting out of relationships is that I would like when I got out of a relationship and I did spend some time by myself, I was like, well, even if I don't find anybody else, like I have me and like I'm pretty cool. So like I'm happy with it, with like me being by myself if I didn't find someone to be in a relationship with. So to Ashley's point, like learning when to let go and then also recognizing like there are other people out there that, like other men out there, other women out there that could be a better companion to you than what you currently have. And like I can say for me, I have not always been like financially savvy. I'm so proud to hear y'all were young, but I was not. I just like, I got money and then I spent it. Like, I was like one of those people that was like, okay, how many hours of overtime do we have to work so that we can take this trip next weekend? Or like, how many hours of overtime do I need to work so I can buy this purse? And I really wish that like, even if it was just a small amount of like savings that I had like started younger, I think it would have been significant. But one thing I did start doing young is investing in like my retirement. And that's one thing that a lot of like young girls, really anyone that's, like coming out of high school or college needs to hear is like definitely invest for retirement as soon as you can, like literally ASAP, because once you start working, like I'm ready to stop working, like I'm ready to retire.
Ryan, and so Ryan, one thing that you said is like hit home. I know I can relate to, like I dated somebody like there was nobody else out there. And then I got into like another long-term relationship. So like I had back to back, serious relationship that shouldn't have been serious. And it's not even about being able to date others. It was just like, I don't think I felt like I couldn't find someone else. It was just I had just got so comfortable and I was just too young to be that comfortable in a relationship where I could have had other experiences and maybe it would have set things differently for me if I didn't focus on being in a relationship. I don't know what's that about. Ashley, where were you? Not giving me advice, friend. But but
we used to joke a lot about you being in those serious relationships.
What was I doing? Like when I think back, what was I really doing? But no, that's good, and I can definitely relate to that. Like you feel like there's nobody else out there. But I think for men and women at that age, enjoy life, build, and don't focus so much on relationships. Like let that come in your 30s. I think that's one thing I wish I would have known for sure. Monica, I don't know if you heard, but I was just, saying like, was there anything in your teens or after graduation in your 20s that you wish you like would have done or, done differently or mistakes that you think about, just where you are now, what you wish you would have known then?
Yeah, I guess a couple things for me. I wish I would have traveled the world. Like there's so many things that I want to see and do. And for me, I had my first child at 24, which it's not super early, but it's not as late as I probably would have if I could redo the life experience. So I didn't get a chance to experience everything that I needed to experience before tying myself down with kids. Like, so don't get me wrong, love my kids, love the experience. However, I just wish I would have lived a little bit more because now You know, when you try to travel, you're juggling things, your responsibilities and everything. And in your 20s, you're growing, you're experiencing life, you're really on your own. And I think I was just starting to really enjoy. So I think that's probably one of my biggest things that I wish I would have done differently and made a different choice in life to prepare myself differently, to start a family later, get married a little bit later as well, with that particular sense. And then also with relationships, I think in my 20s, I started to get into more serious relationships because in my mind, it was, my mom wasn't married anymore, but I wanted that experience of being married, having a family and all this kind of stuff. So I got into serious relationships. So in my 20s, I think there are two of my most serious relationships when I probably should have been dating, having fun, drinking, clubbing, doing all those fun things that I sometimes do now in my 30s. But I think I would have done that differently. I think I would have lived life a little bit more. I would have gone out on dates. I would have probably also changed jobs and careers a lot. I think it also had an effect on my working relationships as well, that I felt like I had to be committed to this job. And I probably would have bounced around and really found that career that I was really looking for. So don't be afraid to try new experiences. Ultimately, is my theme there.
Yes. We're going to get Ryan to talk about some of her stuff in the future about stepping out on faith and trying new things.
Yeah, you know, I will, I was looking earlier today. I was like, how long I've been here? Is this long enough to go somewhere? But like, look at my job and stuff. But yeah, I mean, you're right, Monica, as I'm hearing you talk about that, even like just kind of briefly touching on my recent like transition, I don't think that I would have done it if I did have children, you know, like, because right now, because I felt like it was a big risk, and I still think it is, even though it's 8 months, almost 8 months that I've been here. But like, especially because the last organization I was with was like really stable. And to me, I felt like it was a very family oriented organization. So like, if I did have children, like I probably would have definitely stayed there. You know what I mean? Because I would have been like, I need this stability and this flexibility in my life to like take care of the other stuff.
You know what? And you talking about stability, Ryan, and not taking a risk. I feel like too, I was conditioned. It may have not been said, but it's very clear that like, you got a good paying job. Why are you leaving? You know, and the generation for us is just different, but the expectations and across all industries, it has just changed where people are not staying, and it's okay at 6 months you hop around, and that's accepted by other companies. But you know, I definitely wish I would have been more of a risk taker. I just got really, really comfortable. I'm successful, but I did. I got comfortable early, and here I am 15 years later.
And I would say it was actually stated to me on multiple occasions about, oh, you with this stable company, you have great benefits, you have this salary, and at your age, I wasn't making this kind of money. And again, still never telling anybody what my salary was. But you know, it was the assumptions based off of the lifestyle and everything. So I'm like you, I wish I would have taken more risks when it comes down to it, to really even do something that I was really passionate about during that time frame. Start a business maybe in my 20s.
Yeah. It's not too late.
Don't start.
It's not too late.